If you look at themes, like the theme to undermine, the theme of that really is based on lawlessness. I mean, what we see in the defund the police movement, that is a movement toward lawlessness. What we see with the largest movement of illegal immigration in this country in 20 years, that's lawlessness, where there's a disregard for law and order. That you see that theme occurring in one issue after the other.
Welcome to a special edition of CPAC Now, America UnCanceled, the fight for freedom. That was Tennessee Governor Bill Lee.
Yeah, great appearance at CPAC. It was great to be with Governor Lee and Governor Stitt from Oklahoma. Great. These red states are prospering while the blue states that we are suffering by living in are failing. And it's our great honor to bring Governor Lee on with us now. How you doing, Governor Lee?
Great, sir. Thank you both for having me on. Appreciate it.
Well, I know there's been a lot going on in Tennessee. I think one of the things we want to start talking about you were talking about criminal justice reform on the panel. I know you've been passionate about this issue for some time. In fact, you've been involved in prison ministry as well. Tell us what Tennessee has been able to accomplish in this area of criminal justice reform.
Yeah, I got involved in a prison ministry some 20 years ago, and that really opened my eyes to the reality that we should do something different. I mean, the system is not working for anybody. It's not working for victims. It's not working for those that are incarcerated. And most importantly, it's not working for the taxpayers and for the citizens. If we want to lower the crime rate, and crime is a real challenge and an enormous issue in this country right now, if we want to lower the crime rate, then we have to approach criminal justice reform from a conservative standpoint, recognizing that this is actually a very conservative issue because the goal is to reduce crime, and we do that by improving recidivism, dealing with people on their way out of incarceration in a different way than we've done it in the past, and thinking about who we incarcerate for what reason. We talk a lot about being tough on crime and putting people in prison that need to be there, that are a threat to us, but being really smart on crime as well. So we passed something called the Alternatives to Incarceration Act and the Success and Reentry Act, and at the end of the day, it lowers crime and it reduces the cost to taxpayers, because when someone recidivates, we pay in this state $30,000 a year to incarcerate them. If we can keep them from recommitting a crime, we lower the rate and lower the cost to taxpayers.
Governor, let's take a step back. We're calling this episode The Fight for Freedom. And we're talking about, with criminal justice reform, the idea of people treasuring this great gift of freedom and being able to recapture and be redeemed if they're currently incarcerated and coming out. What does this whole concept of freedom mean to you as an American?
You know, we have, I think, in many ways in the last several years in this country, we've forgotten that the exceptionalism that exists in America is that we have freedom, that we protect people's freedom, that we actually move to allow people to exercise freedom and liberty and rights. And we should do that for all of our citizenry. And the way that we can do that for those who are incarcerated, they need to pay the price for their crime. We know that, and some need to stay there because they are a threat. But for those that we can rehabilitate, for those that we can intervene in their recovery and in their reentry into society, it allows them to exercise freedom, to become productive citizens, to be taxpayers that earn their way as a part of this great nation. So freedom is a part of conservative criminal justice reform. The left has sort of co-opted criminal justice reform for all the wrong reasons. But if we do it right, then the outcomes are better.
And then, of course, there's this balance as well of making sure that we have safe communities, that being a priority, obviously supporting our law enforcement. Tell us about how you've seen these Democrat-run cities just being destroyed in terms of defunding the police. What have you all been able to do in Tennessee to ensure that the police are getting the resources they need to keep the communities safe?
So just this morning, I convened a Tennessee Law Enforcement Training Advisory Council. We started a year ago with a task force. We brought together sheriff's departments, police departments, our highway patrol department. We brought together stakeholders, including legislators, and we began to talk about how it is that we can support police and how it is that we can support law enforcement. I mean, as crime grows, the very wrong thing to do is to move away from the support of law enforcement, the men and women that put their lives on the line every day to keep our communities safe. And Americans want security. I mean, it's a huge issue for them right now, and they see the loss of security in some of these places where law enforcement is not been supported. So I met with this group this morning. We meet with them on a regular basis, and we'll continue to do that. We have instituted new officer training so that we have a greater understanding. Our law enforcement have a greater understanding of how to properly police and interact effectively with communities. We have put in place significant new training. We've put in place the ability for cadets to receive that training in law enforcement agencies across the state with no cost to the agency. I told those law enforcement leaders today that are the police chiefs of our major cities, the sheriffs from some of our rural counties, I want Tennessee to be at a place where the citizens can grow in their trust of law enforcement, and law enforcement knows that we, the state, are fully behind them. That's how we're going to make sure that we have safe communities, and we want to support them, not just financially, but with best practices and with all of the needs and resources that they have to do their job effectively.
There's all this video coming out of people literally a gate in the border being opened and all these people of different ages coming through, some with masks, some without masks, no one having been corona tested, by the way. And then supposedly the Biden administration is flying these people all around the country. You went right from CPAC in Dallas to the border while you were in Texas. What are you doing to help solve the problem of this open, porous border?
You know, I did go to the border, and for a number of reasons. We have 300 National Guardsmen and women down there right now that are serving on the border, and I wanted to talk to them. I wanted to hear from the people that are on the ground and to see it firsthand. I took a helicopter tour and talked to those that are actually intervening and that are supporting the Border Patrol and the customs agents. We have a significant crisis in this country at the border that I don't think Americans fully understand, and it is not just an immigration problem, an illegal immigration problem. It is a national security issue. You know, we have the greatest number of overdose deaths in our state this past year, and many of those overdose deaths are a new, and the law enforcement confirmed that this morning, a new form of meth, a higher, more concentrated form of meth, and fentanyl. Those drugs are coming across the border. There's no argument about the fact that that's happening. So Tennessee is profoundly affected by what's happening at the border. That's the reason I was there, to support our troops, but also just to get a firsthand look at how sex trafficking, human trafficking, drug trafficking is occurring in enormous ways, in a much greater way than it has been in decades in the country. So I'm talking about that, but I'm also convening governors. All of the governors are beginning to realize that it isn't just a border state issue; it's an issue for all of us. And you mentioned, the movement of unaccompanied minors. We actually declined the federal government's request to house unaccompanied minors because we don't want to facilitate what is existing bad policy. And we declined that, but they continued to send them without any transparency, our knowledge about it. We just discovered it primarily through the media. what we need in this country is a plan to secure the border. We need the federal government to do it. We need governors to come together and speak out for that. I think you're going to see that happening. What we really need is a secure border, and we don't have it right now.
Yeah, I think that's, you're right. I mean, I think that the governors are the ones that are, governors like yourself that understand what needs to be done. I just think there's no appetite coming from the federal government to stop the influx of illegal immigrants. So it becomes a great challenge, I think, for the governors. And you all have to experience the stress of that. Let's shift gears a second to, obviously this fear again of lockdowns coming, mask mandates coming. We know that the American Academy of Pediatrics, pediatricians, and CDC, they're saying kids got to wear their mask as young as the age of 2. What are you all planning on doing in Tennessee? I mean, this idea again of mask mandates on these kids, I just think is crazy.
Well, I was asked about that this morning, in fact, at a press conference that I had. And the question came to me that the science is saying we should do this and that. The science, the science says that children rarely have a severe illness related to COVID. This is not an issue that is a severe illness issue for kids. I said today that while we have district authority across our state, I hope that our districts do not mandate masks in this state. And I don't think that will happen. We may have 1 or 2 districts that do that, but I think the people of Tennessee recognize, we have this virus. It exists. We're managing it. It's a health issue like we manage any health issue in our state. And we have the tools, vaccines for those who want to take them. The choice is up to the people. I get asked a lot about, well, your vaccination rate is whatever percentage. The vaccination rate is a reflection of the will of the people and a desire for their personal decision making, a result of their personal decision making. The government, we have an obligation to provide information, to provide education, but we do not have an obligation to force or mandate or blame or shame, and we certainly don't need to be requiring that kids wear masks to go to school.
Okay, so Schwab, I know
so
I
he's
mentioned
in the running.
He's in the running. So
Tennessee's
we've been
in the running.
saying like, well, should we move to Florida, take the kids there, take the kids to Texas? Okay, Tennessee's in.
I mean, we had this whole conversation with Governor Stitt about whether or not the next CPAC should be in Oklahoma City or Nashville. I think you got a leg up on him, Governor.
We would be very happy for anyone in this country to come to Nashville. And they're coming to Tennessee in droves right now because they're leaving the states that are unfriendly to them. And that doesn't just mean people, that means companies as well. I can't tell you how many companies we're talking to right now that say we can't take the restrictions and the taxation and the regulation that's in our state, and it's ratcheting up every day.
Yep.
And they're moving to states where there is freedom.
And let me do a shameless plug for the American Conservative Union. We do ratings of every senator, every member of Congress. By the way, I think you already know this, Governor. You have 2 outstanding senators from the state of Tennessee. But we also rate all the legislative chambers across the country, 8,000 ratings. And Tennessee has been at the top or near the top in every one of those years. So if you're a business out there considering the regulatory environment on where to put your headquarters, look at our ratings. They tell you that a state like Tennessee is a pretty good prospect.
Yep, we like that. And let me just put in a plug for American Conservative Union. We pass what we believe is substantive criminal justice reform that has been hard to do historically in very conservative states, but the American Conservative Union was very helpful to us. We pulled together Newt Gingrich and Rick Perry and Brooke Rollins, and the American Conservative Union spoke out loudly with opinion pieces about how this legislation that we were proposing is very conservative in its principles. And so I want to say thank you very much for your help in getting historic, important conservative criminal justice reform done in the state of Tennessee.
Well, we'll do more, Governor, and thanks for your leadership.
I do want to mention real quick, I know this is a big issue that's impacting so many parents across the country, but Tennessee, again, under your leadership and what the state legislature was able to do is that they banned critical race theory. You signed that bill. Why is that so important to ensure that we stop this indoctrination of our children, pitting one group against the next, really what I think promoting hatred? Why was that an important piece of legislation to push through the banning of critical race theory?
Most important to me because the people of Tennessee wanted it. Because parents do not want their children to be pitted one against the other. They don't want to be to lose the American principle of the sanctity of the individual. That's what critical race theory does. It's divisive. It is not history. It is political commentary on history. And no one wants their kids to receive political commentary unless the parent gives it to them themselves. We're the most exceptional nation in the world. We are the best country in the globe. Our kids need to know that. They need to be taught it. They need to understand that
Amen.
America is a very unique nation, and they need to recognize that we are a country that is moving toward becoming a more perfect union, and not just to be taught that we are some sort of imperfect union that needs to be done away with. And ultimately, I really believe there are groups of people in this country who want this country to be done away with, as it were. And the best way to do that is to divide from within. Critical race theory is divisive. Most Americans do not believe it's good for our country. And so we banned it in Tennessee.
Well, we thank you for your leadership, Governor Bill Lee. I can't even tell you, I mean, you are the type of governor that we need in all 50 states if we could have someone like you there, because you stand for freedom, you stand for your citizens, and you understand why this country is the greatest country in the world. So thank you so much for your leadership, and we hope to make it down to Tennessee, right, Matt?
Definitely.
You're going to have to make that happen.
Last time I was in Tennessee, we were in Nashville. We've actually had some CPACs in Tennessee. We've been to Memphis. I got a great Stetson hat, so, you know. And I love the music, and boy, do I love the food. So.
You need some boots to go along with it.
That's exactly
I will
right.
tell you, though, that the Schlapp girls, as much as we provide them political indoctrination from the Schlapp family, they still love Taylor Swift, okay? That's not going to change.
That's not changing.
Okay?
But Johnny Cash is the number one. Johnny Cash is number one in our house. Let's be clear.
There you go. He's an awesome, he's an icon. Thank you all for what you do. Thank you for what you do and the leadership you all provide.
Well, thank you, sir. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll be right back with Craig Shirley. He is the Reagan biographer and presidential historian. Will America stay united or will we be divided? That is the big question we'll be asking Craig. Stay with us. Welcome back to a special edition of CPAC Now, America Uncanceled. We're talking about the fight for freedom. Yes, the freedom here in the United States of America. And I really wanted to have an opportunity to speak to someone who is an intellect, someone who understands history, someone who is a presidential historian, a Reagan historian. Joining me, Craig Shirley. Craig, thanks for being with us on CPAC Now.
Thank you, Mercedes. It's really a pleasure to be with you. Thank you.
And you're also a Reagan biographer. You spent a lot of time studying this great president, this great American. What do you think Ronald Reagan would be thinking right now when we're seeing what's happening here in the U.S.?
He'd shrug his shoulders. You know, my wife and I both work for Reagan, and then I've written now 5.5 books about Ronald Reagan, many articles, and I've given many talks. I think, you know, he was such an innately hopeful person. He would look at the situation, look at the bright side. And that is that the states are reaffirming their primacy over the national government. You see states making their own laws in contravention of the national government, making their own rules and regulations. And, you know, some like, for instance, Texas. Texas decided to build its own border wall because the national government couldn't get its act together. This is a wonderful thing. We're seeing federalism in the 21st century reasserting itself exactly as the founders intended. You know, at the beginning in 1787, when they were in Philadelphia, they didn't talk. There was no national identity. They talked about the 13 states. The sovereignty of the 13 states is there in the Constitution. And when John Hancock introduced the Constitution, he referred to the 13 states. He did not, and we referred to the United States as United States of America, but the 13 United States of America. So so if the country breaks apart, and I think it will actually. I think eventually America is going to break apart. You're going to have Texas and Florida and Tennessee as part of sane Virginia, and as part of insane America, and then you'll have insane America, and that will be California and Michigan and New York and Pennsylvania and Massachusetts. And the two countries will have trade relationships, they'll have travel relationships. It's almost inevitable. There's nothing culturally the same between a person from Washington State and a person from Florida. They have nothing in common.
Yeah, it's so interesting you brought that up, because actually when we were prepping for the show, that was one question I really wanted to ask you is, we're supposed to be the United States of America. All of a sudden, it really feels like it is a very divided America. Have we ever, and let's maybe exclude the Civil War, have we ever seen our nation go through this, or talk about the Civil War as well, where there's almost like a undoing of what has brought us together as a nation?
Well, that's a great question, Mercedes. Over time, from 1787 forward, there was a glue that held the nation together and gave it a manifest destiny, gave it a national purpose, American exceptionalism, however you want to characterize it. We had World War II, which held us together. We had the Cold War, which held us together. We had World War I, which held us together. We had the Great Depression, which held us together. But today is that you can't find anything. COVID could have been, an issue which held us together, but instead it's contributed to our divisiveness. You have laws and regulations in one state that you don't have in the next state, and there's so many rules and regulations. One state is teaching this new form of it, the 1619 project, and another state is not. They are breaking apart. Yes, we broke apart in the Civil War, and the two countries went their own way. There was the Southern Confederacy and the Northern Union. They went their own way. There probably hasn't been another period. I've thought about this a lot, Mercedes. There probably hasn't another period where we've come this close, except at the beginning, when we were 13 colonies and then 13 states. And there was never any national purpose until the Louisiana Purchase and other issues that came up in the 1900s and then in the 20th century.
So let me ask you, because I think President Ronald Reagan, understood the fragility of our republic, understood the fragility of freedom, and why so much of the basis of our founding documents were on this idea of we are given God-given rights. The government's there to protect these rights. These are the rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Why are we losing that now in modern politics?
Boy, that's a good question. I think is that it's just almost inevitable. There is no unifying issue that holds us together. Is that people from New York like a big corrupt government in Washington because they can take advantage of it. People in Texas don't like a big corrupt government in Washington because they see it as an abuser of their freedoms and abilities to come and go. It all depends on where you're from, really. Geography is destiny, and I think that people's attitudes are shaped by their surroundings, and people's character is shaped by the surroundings. Jefferson once said is that a consolidated government would be the most corrupt government on earth. Well, we have a consolidated government, and it is the most corrupt on earth, Washington, D.C. And there's no getting rid of it. There's no reforming it. There's only one solution, and that is there's two solutions. either tolerate it and suffer or leave it. And I think that you're already seeing, Mercedes, is that you're already seeing the slow motion breakup in the United States. 3 counties in Oregon want to secede from Oregon and join Idaho. The Buckhead wants to leave Atlanta because they don't like they're not in favor of stopping policing. They're in favor of policing. Staten Island wants to secede from. There's a movement in Staten Island to secede from New York State. So you're seeing a lot. Of course, they've been talking Virginia for years, from Southern Virginia wanting to secede from Northern Virginia. So you're seeing it slowly manifesting. So I think we will see in our lifetime. You and I will see in our lifetime a state being aggressive and taking the first step. All it takes is the first step, and I think it will be Florida. We'll see there's no benefit to being a part of the United States, and their legislature voting to secede from the United States. The only benefit right now is national defense, and you could work out a relationship where they could secede and still pay for or get national defense.
Right.
Yes.
That is.
Yeah, you could have a mutual defense treaty, just as they have it in France or Eastern Europe or former Soviet republics. They all have mutual defense treaties, and you could break apart and create sane America and have a mutual defense treaty.
That's fascinating. It's so true. And then you see this it's different when it comes to the European Union, but that was the whole Brexit movement, with Great Britain separating from the European Union, yet still sharing some of the benefits. I'd like to get into, putting on your political hat. Obviously, President Reagan, as we know, same as President Trump, they really revived the Republican Party during a time that I thought the Republican Party really lost their way. But how are these two men similar, and how are they different?
Well, they're similar in terms of there's a lot of issues that Ronald Reagan brought to the Republican Party. Just take the issue of tax cuts. In 1972, Senator Ted Kennedy and Senator Walter Mondale introduced a bill to cut personal taxes as a means of stimulating the economy. The Nixon administration said, no, we can prime the pump by increasing federal spending. Now, can you imagine that? Here's a Republican administration arguing for increased federal spending, and here's 2 liberal Democratic senators arguing for cutting people's personal income taxes. The situation, it's completely changed. It's also changed on trade. It's changed on national defense. It's changed on both parties have changed on issue after issue after issue. But Reagan brought a new set of issues to the Republican Party: social, foreign policy, and economic. But his basis was everything was based on individual freedom. If you go back to Reagan's speeches, you see over and over and over his recitation of the rights of man, the rights of and freedom and personal dignity and personal privacy, those various issues. And as a matter of fact, you go to the Reagan Library, inscribed on the wall there are both the preface to the Declaration and the preface to the Constitution. I know you've been there, but that sometimes escapes people. But he was in many ways a small L libertarian. He really believed, this is what animated him, was individual rights and individual privacy, and he believed that his whole life. And he succeeded as a president in shrinking the scope of the national government. And not only that, he increased the national economy by 6-fold. So, in effect, he did what Jefferson did. People look at the Louisiana Purchase and they say, oh, well, Jefferson violated his principles of, small government by using an activist government to purchase the Louisiana Purchase. But if you increase the size of the United States and you don't increase the size of government, then in effect, you watered down, you liquidated the influence of the national government. Reagan did the same thing by increasing the national economy and shrinking the national government. He did shrink the national debt and federal spending by several percentage points. So he had left shrinking the influence of the national government. Trump believed the same thing. Trump believed that tax cuts were important. Reagan saw them I don't know if Trump saw them the way Reagan did. Trump saw them as stimulating the economy, which is a good thing. But Reagan saw them as increasing the individual power of the individual. Is that, from the time that I wasn't asleep in high school physics, I remember my teacher saying, power can neither be destroyed nor created. Power can only be moved around.
Right.
And for Reagan, it was by tax cuts, it was reducing the power of the national government and increasing the power of the individual. That was the philosophical basis for Reagan's tax cuts. They're both strong anti-communist, anti-terror. There's a lot of similarities. Strict constructionists as judges. Thank God we've got strict constructionists on the Supreme Court and so many federal appointments, the appeals court, and other courts. Is that so? Trump followed Reagan in many, many ways. I think that Reagan would have appreciated the conservative issues that Trump pursued. He wouldn't have appreciated the personal attacks. That wasn't Reagan's style. But
Right.
say Levine, that Trump, it made Trump happy. So what? It may have cost him the presidency, but it was part of his character, it's part of his personality.
Well, I got to tell you, Craig, it would have been great for Ronald Reagan to have been able to tweet. He would have been, I think, one of the best out there.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right, Mercedes. Is that when people have asked me before, how would Reagan adapt to this new world, this new form of communications? And if you think about it, commercial radio was a novelty in the 1930s, but he mastered it.
Yes.
Is that talking pictures were a novelty in the late 1930s, but Reagan mastered those. Is that commercial television was a novelty in the 1950s, but Reagan mastered that with GE Theater. And then later, television, the radio, the soundbite, Reagan mastered all those things. So you're absolutely right. If he was around today, he'd be on Facebook and he'd be tweeting and he'd be using all these new forms of social media because he saw them as a way to empower the individual and take power away from the state. That's why is that state regulating, Facebook or Biden using the power of the White House to tell Facebook what it can post and what it can't post is so scary and dangerous, because it's only a few steps from, taking down propaganda, what they think is antivirus propaganda to anti-political propaganda. It's just so dangerous.
You're so right, Craig. And I know one thing is that Ronald Reagan would have stood up for freedom of speech till the end. And I think for Donald Trump to be banned from these social media platforms is an absolute disgrace. And like you said, the way
it's a crime.
Absolutely. But we want to thank you so much for joining us. This is so insightful. I want to have you back on the show because let me tell you, we need a lot of history lessons for our youth. I'm so worried, as you know, because these socialists, what they love to do is erase history. That's always one of the first things. So, Craig Shirley, thank you so much for joining us.
Thanks, Mercedes. Have a good day.